You're in the kitchen, making coffee. Your cell phone vibrates. It's a message from your father. I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Your body reacts before your mind. Your stomach tightens. Your shoulders tense. That familiar weight settles in your chest. You know it's not really urgent. It never is. But you also know that if you don't respond immediately, more messages will come, each one escalating a little more, until you give in. You always give in. And as you type sure, I'm here, a part of you silently screams, when did responding to a message from your own father become an act of survival? That feeling, that knot in your stomach that precedes any interaction with him, didn't start yesterday. It started when you were too young to understand that fathers can also be hungry, a hunger that no child should have to feed. You were 7 years old when you first realized something was wrong, but you couldn't name it. It was Sandy. You spent the whole morning drawing a dinosaur to show him, every detail carefully considered, the colors chosen with the precision of someone who still believes that love is proportional to effort. When he came home from the street, you ran over with the drawing in your hand. He barely glanced at it. Later, I'm busy. But he wasn't busy. He was on the couch, scrolling through his phone. And you stood there, holding that piece of paper that suddenly felt as heavy as concrete. That afternoon, you learned your first lesson. You don't matter enough. But the child you were couldn't accept that. Children can't simply give up on their parents. It's biologically impossible. So you did what every child does when love doesn't come naturally. You started trying to earn it. By the age of 9, you had already become an expert at reading micro-expressions. You could tell from his tone of voice whether it was a day when you could exist or if you needed to disappear. You learned that your achievements only mattered when they served as something for him to tell others about. So you achieved not for yourself, but to give him material for self-promotion. High grades, soccer trophies, praise from teachers, each one a coin that you deposited in the machine, hoping that this time the prize would come out. Genuine attention. Approval that didn't come with conditions. It never happened, and something cruel began to happen. You realized that when you completely erased yourself, when you stopped having needs, opinions, limits, things became calmer. When you became a mirror that only reflected his greatness, he even smiled at you. So you started erasing your colors, one by one. You gave up asking for help with homework because he always turned it into a lecture about how you should be smarter. You stopped sharing your anxieties because he used them as ammunition. You're too weak. That's why you can't handle pressure. You stopped talking about your dreams because he diminished them until they fit the size he approved of. You were 12 years old when you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize anything anymore. Just an empty space where there used to be a person. And society applauded your transformation. Teachers praised you for being mature for your age. Code for emotionally suppressed aunts would say what an exemplary son when you were quiet during dinners, letting him monopolize all the conversations. Your parents' friends would comment how helpful you are when you put aside your own needs to meet his demands. No one saw that you were bleeding inside. No one realized that a mature child is just a child who never got to be a child. And there's a name for this pain you carry: reverse emotional parentification. You became your own father's father, his emotional regulator, the constant validator of his greatness. And every time you did that, a part of you died. The part that had the right to be cared for, to be imperfect, to simply be. By 15, you had already internalized the equation. Your existence is only tolerable when you are useful, when you reflect well on him, when you disappear enough for him to fit entirely in the space. But something even more insidious was happening. Your developing brain was recording this as a fundamental truth about you and about love. Each neuron connecting to form a map that says, affection is conditional. You need to earn the right to exist. Vulnerability is fatal weakness. And when you ask yourself today why it's so hard to simply be, the answer is there, engraved in the neural connections that were formed when you learned that fully existing was too dangerous. What happens neurologically when a child grows up under a narcissistic parent is devastating in its precision. Their nervous system learns to live in constant hype. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for a sense of self, for autonomous decisions, develops in an atrophied way because it has never been allowed to function freely. The amygdala, on the other hand, becomes hypersensitive. You become a walking radar for approval and rejection, detecting threats where normal people see only everyday interactions. And here's what few people understand. Paternal narcissism isn't just about an inflated ego. It's about a voracious and insatiable need to be the absolute center of the family's emotional universe. The narcissistic father cannot tolerate that his son is a separate individual with his own needs. For him, children exist as extension objects that must reflect his greatness, validate his importance, serve his emotional needs. This creates something that psychology calls a false self. You develop an entire persona built to please, to be lovable, to never bother. And this persona receives so much external validation from family, from society, sometimes even from therapists who don't look deep enough that you begin to believe that this is who you really are. The helpful person, the good son, the one who always understands, the one who never demands too much. But beneath this persona, there is a true self that is suffocated, angry, exhausted, desperate to be seen, and the tension between these two selves generates an internal fragmentation that hurts physically. You are constantly at war with yourself. Gabor Mate describes this with surgical precision. Children who grow up needing to choose between authenticity and attachment always choose attachment, because attachment is survival. So you abandon parts of yourself, not because you want to, but because your child brain correctly calculates that being who you truly are might cost you the love you need to survive. And when you reach adulthood, this doesn't simply disappear. It becomes the architecture of your existence. In romantic relationships, you replicate the pattern with painful precision. You choose partners who need to be the center because it's familiar. You become the emotional caregiver, the one who always gives in, the one who always understands. And when someone genuinely available appears, you feel disgusted. Because emotional availability feels weak, feels wrong. Your nervous system has been trained to recognize love as something you have to constantly earn, not something that simply exists. You find yourself in relationships where you're always proving your worth, always one step behind, always adjusting your size to fit the space left over. And when it finally ends, exhausted, emptied, you look back and realize you spent years emotionally feeding another person and left the relationship without knowing who you are. At work, you're the employee everyone loves and no one promotes. You say yes to everything, work on every holiday, take on extra projects without asking for recognition, because recognition seems arrogant, seems wrong. You were trained to shine just enough so that others shine brighter. And when the promotion comes, it goes to someone less qualified, but more comfortable occupying space. And you swallow the anger, as you always have. In friendships, you are the eternal confidant, the one who is always available, the one who always understands, the one who carries everyone's secrets and traumas. But when you need help, when you're falling apart, you can't call. You literally can't. Because asking for help seems like intolerable weakness. And also because deep down, you don't believe anyone would come. You were trained to believe that your needs are burdens. So you carry everything alone until you can't take it anymore. And when you finally ask for help, it comes out as an explosion or complete collapse, never as a simple and direct request. Because you never learned that needs are normal. And in your relationship with yourself, you are the most brutal critic there is. Every achievement is minimized. Every mistake is evidence that you are fundamentally inadequate. You have an inner judge that sounds exactly like him, pointing out every flaw, demanding perfection, denying any need for rest or compassion. You have completely internalized his voice, and now you do to yourself what he did to you. You are always available to everyone, but no one really knows you. You are praised for being low maintenance, but you are dying of loneliness. You can take care of anyone but yourself. You feel guilty when you say no, but resentful when you say yes. You are hyper-independent and desperately needy at the same time. You want intimacy, but panic when someone really gets close. You logically know that you are not responsible for the emotions of others, but you feel that you are. You have professional success, but a constant feeling of fraud. You want to be seen, but you hide when someone really looks. You crave approval, but despise those who give it to you easily. These contradictions are not character flaws. They are symptoms of a nervous system trained in impossible conditions. And there's a desire that lives deep inside you, so secret that you barely admit it to yourself. You fantasize that one day he'll wake up different, that he'll call and say, "I saw you. I always saw you, and I'm sorry for making you feel like you needed to disappear so I could exist." You imagine him asking for details of your life, not to use in conversations with other people, but because he genuinely wants to know. You dream of an apology that specifically acknowledges what he did, not in sorry for anything, but in sorry for making you my therapist when you were 8 years old. And you so desperately want to believe that if you're just good enough, available enough, helpful enough, it will all happen, that you'll finally receive what you should have received freely as a child, unconditional love. And it's painfully fair that you want that. You should have had that. Every child should have. And carrying that unsatisfied desire, that hunger for a father who never was and never will be able to truly see you, is one of the loneliest pains there is, because you can't talk about it. Because society says you should just get over it, that you should be grateful for what you had, that he did the best he could, but he didn't, and you know it. And validating that truth, that you deserved more, that you were wronged, that your pain is real, is where healing begins. And here's what you need to hear, even if it hurts. He won't change, not in the way you need him to. Pathological narcissism isn't something that's fixed with enough love from a child. You've tried that for years, decades, maybe, and it didn't work because it wasn't about you never being enough. It was about him being unable to see beyond himself. And that means the rescue fantasy needs to die. And that death hurts more than you can imagine anything could hurt. It's grieving for a father who never existed, for a childhood you never had, for a version of yourself that could have been if you'd been allowed to just be. But this grief, this specific, brutal, necessary grief, is also the gateway to your freedom. You believed specific lies that this pattern taught you. First lie: you only have value when you are useful. The truth is that your value is inherent, not earned. You don't need to do anything to deserve to exist. Second lie. Asking for help is weakness. The truth is that vulnerability is the bravest thing there is, especially for you who have been punished for it your whole life. Third lie. If you were better, he would have loved you differently. The truth is that his inability to love you says nothing about his kindness. It says everything about his capacity. Fourth lie. You need to keep the peace at all costs. The truth is that peace built on your self-annihilation is not peace, it's suppression. And healing isn't about visualizing abundance or affirming that you are enough. Healing is about brutal work of deconstruction and reconstruction. It's about finally feeling the anger you were never allowed to feel. It's about grieving the childhood you should have had. It's about reparenting yourself, giving your 8-year-old inner self the protection that the adult in your life should have given. Carl Jung said that we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. For you, this means stopping running from the anger, sadness, and loneliness you carry. It means finally witnessing your own pain without minimizing it, without comparing it to those who had worse, without justifying their behavior because of the difficult childhood they had. Bessel van der Kolk, who spent decades studying trauma, discovered that healing comes through the body. Your body holds every memory of having to stay small, of having swallowed words, of having suppressed needs. And you need to give that body permission to finally release what is stored through somatic therapy, through anger expressed in safe spaces, through movements your body was never allowed to make as a child, saying no with your whole body, occupying space completely, existing loudly. So, the question that could change everything. If you no longer needed his approval, if you genuinely believed it wouldn't come, and that you didn't need it to survive, who would you be? How would you move through the world? What choices would you make? What relationships would you leave behind? What dreams would you finally allow yourself to dream? And here are the signs that healing is happening. You say no without elaborating 3 paragraphs of justification. You feel anger and don't immediately turn it into guilt. You ask for help and don't feel like a burden. You receive a compliment and don't immediately look for the trick. You take up space without apologizing. You stop compulsively checking your phone when he takes too long to respond. You have a boundary and maintain it even when he tries to manipulate. You feel peace without needing him to be happy first. The pattern was never the problem. The problem was not having a choice. Growing up, you didn't have a choice. You did what you needed to do to survive. But now you do, and choice is where your freedom begins. So today, you can do something small but revolutionary. You can reply to his urgent message 3 hours later. You cannot justify why you can't visit him on the weekend. You can hang up the phone when he starts talking about himself non-stop. You can look in the mirror and say out loud, I deserve to be seen. I always have. And when guilt comes because it will, you can remember, guilt is not evidence of wrongdoing. Guilt is evidence that you are doing something different, something that goes against years of conditioning. And that's exactly what needs to happen. You've spent your whole life making his size the only space. Now it's time to find out how much space you really occupy when you stop squeezing yourself. And the answer may surprise you, because you are much bigger than you were allowed to be. And that greatness yours, not the one reflected in him, has always been there, waiting to finally breathe.